Story 1. Am I the a-hole for refusing to punish or allow my wife to punish our son? This all started back in March. My son's best friend turned 13. In his family, 13th birthday is a huge deal. In addition to a massive party, which all four of us were invited to, his parents also took him to Disney World. They invited my son to attend as well. My wife was hesitant to consent to this. She said it was unfair to allow our son to go when our 9-year-old daughter can't, especially since she loves Disney and princesses. I said that our kids won't always have the exact same opportunities, and if we set a precedent here, we'll have to stick to it, and when our daughter gets a similar opportunity. So we'd just be punishing both our children needlessly. My wife reluctantly agreed that we should allow our son to go. I gave our son money to buy his sister souvenirs. He did, and his friend's parents even bought extra stuff for him to give to her. Still, when she saw him come back wearing a Star Wars shirt with the Mickey hat and trading pin lanyard, she burst into tears. My wife later said we made a huge mistake and never should have let him go. I mistakenly thought all of that was behind us. Now we're not well off financially, but my brother-in-law is, and he invited all of us to visit a beach house he rented for a summer send-off. My wife told me she wants to have our son stay with my dad and just take our daughter to even the score. I told my wife that isn't happening. We are their parents. We can't favor one child over the other. Not being invited to the birthday trip of a kid you barely know is in no way comparable to being left out of a family vacation, and I'm shocked she would even suggest such a thing. I refuse to allow it. Now my wife is angry, but I don't care. I'm not punishing my son for being lucky. Am I the a-hole? You can't keep trying to balance the scales between every little thing that your kids are getting for opportunities. They're going to get older and have different lives and different experiences. And to literally say well, you got to go on a trip because you were friends with this kid, and so now you don't get to go on family vacation. That's nuts. What if you have more fun on the family vacation? Or what if you have less fun on the family vacation? Does he get left out of the next one too because he had too much fun at Disney World and you guys didn't have as much fun at the beach or whatever? It rained one day. So nope, he's still got one day that he has to miss on vacation. Do you see how ridiculous this all gets? You can't do that. Your children have to learn to deal with some disappointment in the world. You cannot keep everything perfectly balanced, Thanos. So yeah, no, I don't think the person posting this is the a-hole. I don't think that the mom is either, but I think she needs to actually really stop and think about just how out of control that line of thinking really is. Story 2. Entitled Parents Ask Me to Remove My Prosthetic. For a bit of background, I, 24 male, am half-deaf on my left side due to a birth defect. I also have a misshaped ear due to a combination of birth defects and surgeries to repair it. When I got a bit older, I started wearing a prosthetic ear on that side to cover it up. It wasn't perfect, but it looked better than what I originally had. Unfortunately, though, these types of prosthetics don't last forever and have to be replaced every so often as the color begins to fade and it tears around the edges. It is removable. I was due for a new one and was just waiting on my insurance to approve it before the prosthetist sent it to me. For the actual story, I was working in a pediatric emergency room at the time and had just received an order to perform an EKG on a roughly 8 to 10-year-old patient. When I walked in the room and began to introduce myself to the family, mom, dad, and the patient, the mother looked up at me and gasped. I was taken aback and asked her what was wrong. She told me, "Your ear is really freaking me out. Is it supposed to be some kind of Halloween costume or something? It seems inappropriate for a children's hospital." Mind you, it was only October 2nd or 3rd. I explained to her that I have a disability for which I wear a prosthetic. She then asked me to take it off because it's making me uncomfortable. I politely declined because it's held on by medical glue and not so easy to take on and off. I proceeded to do my job and perform the EKG, but throughout the procedure, the father decided to repeatedly probe me for personal information, asking me things like, "Are you sure you're qualified to do this?" and "How long did you go to school before this job?" I answered his questions, but could very obviously tell that he was insinuating I was mentally disabled and shouldn't be working in this field. I finished the procedure as quickly as I could and left. Not saying anything to the parents, but did wish the child well. I gave the report to the bedside nurse and asked her not to call me for this patient unless they absolutely needed to. I kept my mouth shut at the time, but in retrospect, I wish I had spoken up for myself more. Some people just have no respect for those with disabilities. What rude, gross people. And I feel like I've read a story like this before, or maybe it's a repeat. I don't know. We don't have time. Look, don't do this. I'm sorry if it's unusual for you to see a prosthetic, but to ask someone to take it off because it makes you uncomfortable, what if that person said, "Oh, don't look at me. I hate the way your face looks. It's gross." You would be offended by that, right? Don't say this kind of stuff to people, and do not start prodding doctors and stuff like that because you don't trust them in that way. Oh my God, just a gross family being gross. That poor kid is being raised by some extremely rude people, and boy, I hope that child does not take on those traits. Story 3. I published a poem about my ex in a literary magazine he'd been trying to get into for years. We were both in high school, and at the end of the relationship, he told me he was just in it for the intercourse, that he didn't really mean any of it, and that I obviously just wanted him because I was horny. He then went and had a hot and heavy makeout sesh with my best friend and came back and told me I was a bad kisser compared to her. Yeah, he was a jerk. Well, flashback to a few months previous, I was angry at him because he was being really hot and cold, and so I wrote an angry poem about him. The magazine he had been trying to get into had a website and would publish poems based off of popularity on the website. He had gotten me to join a few months previous, and I had only had a few poems up. I decided against posting it then because it would be too mean. Well, after he had pulled that crap, I decided I wanted a little revenge. So I posted the poem, and suddenly it was getting a lot of popularity. And I get a notification from the magazine saying they want to publish it. So what was the first thing I did? Messaged him that I got published in this magazine. He got excited for me and congratulated me until he read the poem. Several million people have read the poem in the magazine, and to this day, he still hasn't gotten published. Man, why we got so many gross people? What a D-bag of a person. Oh my God. The fact that all he got in, comeuppance was a nasty poem published about him, and in a magazine he wanted to get published in, he still hasn't. I guess that's pretty good. But man, oh man, I feel like also, I want karma to really hit him back because he sounds like an absolute sleaze. Just a gross person. To literally tell someone, I was just in it for the intercourse? Gross. What a gross human. If I ever heard that a friend of mine said that to someone, I would not be friends with them anymore. Immediately. I don't care if we had been friends for a decade. I'd be like, oh, you're a bad person. Bye. Story 4, entitled Mom Wants My ID. So I work at a grocery store. I'm also 24 years old, but my family has a chronic baby face. This is important to the story. It's my day off and I wanted to get some chores done, like clean the garage and give my dogs a bath, but I'm out of dog shampoo and the garage has a major spider infestation, so I ran to the store I work at for dog shampoo and bug killer. I then pass the beer aisle and think to myself how awesome a nice beer would be after I get all my work done and pick out a couple single bottles of brands I've been meaning to try out. Behind me, I hear someone loudly exclaim, "Ahem!" I look behind me and see a woman with a full cart and baby in the seat. I assume I must have been in her way as I did have earbuds in and I take a while to read the labels when I decide to try a new beer. "Sorry," I say, moving out of the way. "You're not old enough to buy that, are you?" She scoffs. Yes I am. I know I look really young. I get it a lot." "Don't lie to me. I have 3 boys. 2 of them are teens. I know what you kids get up to." She then points to the big killer, the bug killer in my cart. "And I bet you're going to get high off that, aren't you?" "Miss, I'm old enough. It's my day off work and I'm getting some stuff done like killing spiders in my garage, giving my dogs a bath, and then relaxing with a nice beer." "Then show me your ID." "No." "Then you're lying." "Lady, I don't need to show you my ID unless you're a cop or an employee here. It has my private information on there." She huffs and looks around, possibly for an employee or someone else to back her up, but no one was around, so I just leave. A few minutes later, I check out in the self-scan, and guess who I see again? Entitled Mom. She glares at me and watches as I scan the beers and then wait for the employees to clear it for me. When the employee walks up, Entitled Mom loudly says, "You better check his ID, he's underage." The employee just kind of looks dumbfounded at her. Miss, he works here. I know for a fact he's over 21. I sold him beer before." Entitled Mom goes quiet. She probably wasn't expecting that I did in fact work here. She scoffs and says, "Well, can't ever be too careful these days," and walks off. The employee and I have a laugh about it, and she scans my ID, and then I pay for my stuff. I think that's the worst that's ever happened about how I look young. I had in the past had a smoke shop employee doubt me until he saw my ID, but this was the craziest so far. I think we may have had this story too. This sounds familiar. My memory's not the best. But what I do know is, lady, why are you doing that? What are you, the police? Do you know that they check the IDs at the stores? Like, all the stores ID. They ID me. I'm 40, and I still get ID'd bald and with a beard that now has more than one gray hair freckled in it. You might not see it in high def, but let me tell you, ultra high def, they're there. And I get ID. So I'm pretty sure the kid who looks to be, kind of young, probably going to get ID'd by the people who will actually check that stuff. So, lady, you can stop being the Batman of the beer aisle and maybe just mind your own friggin' business. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.